Hello and welcome to my channel, Jack in the Book Stack. In this video, I'm going to read 3 Stephen King books and then rank them in terms of my favorite to my least favorite. The books that I have chosen for this video are Needful Things, Rose Madder, and King's newest release, FairyTale. Before we get reading though, if you are a Stephen King fan, go ahead and drop your favorite Stephen King novel in the comments down below. And if you haven't read him yet, go ahead and drop your most anticipated Stephen King read that you want to try next. Let's get reading.
Simon & Schuster Audio presents FairyTale, a novel by Stephen King. Read by Seth Numrick with Stephen King.
17. And Mr. Bowditch. 11. There was an ancient picket fence running the length of the property, leaning forward in places and sagging back in others. A rusty, waist-high gate barred the...
Hi, Nikita. Are you a good girl like Radar? Huh? Both old German Shepherd girls. Oh, yeah.
Before we get into the 3 books that I just read for this video, let's talk about It. I read It in October 2020, and what's really interesting about my experience with this book is I had planned on reading it for spooky season. I think I even started it, and then I broke my arm, which was painful and miserable, and so basically all I could do was sit on the couch and read, but I was in a lot of pain, right? So I was taking pain pills and listening to the audio, which was a trip in itself because I would kind of like zone out and I would be in the book hallucinating with Pennywise. It was wild. So I read this and it was really scary, I think particularly because of my experience, and so I wasn't ready to watch the movie. Normally I love to read the book and then watch the movie adaptation right after. I couldn't do it. But this was the year that I was finally ready to try it out. I watched the original and it was awesome. Granted, I probably forgot a lot of the details of this book, but everything that I remember was in the movie and it was great. It wasn't too scary either. Firstly, because I knew what was going to happen next because I read the book, but also because the special effects were so cheesy. The movie's a lot older, right? So yeah, there was some ominous music and some things jumping out at you, but generally I was kind of laughing at the scary scenes. So it was a great experience. I'm so glad I finally watched it. Can you guess, of the trio of books I read, which one was my favorite? My number 1 spot goes to FairyTale, and I am so excited to talk about this. In summary, this book is about a 17-year-old boy named Charlie who decides to pay back the universe for some answered prayers by being the caretaker for his senior neighbor and his elderly dog. Charlie and his mysterious neighbor form a very tight connection, and he also gets a bond with the senior dog named Radar. Charlie grew up listening to various fairy tales like Jack and the Beanstalk, but he gets his own taste for fantasy when he finds a portal to another world in his neighbor's shed. This other world has some mysterious powers that Charlie is really motivated to check out, so he decides to go exploring. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about this book. A lot of people say they love the first third of the book, which is really where Charlie and his neighbor are being introduced and forming their bond, and I loved that as well. I love the bond of the older generation and the younger. I like the kindness involved between them, how they really enjoyed each other's company, and of course Radar, the aging German Shepherd, was my favorite character. And that also leads me to the other thing I really enjoyed about this book. It's very specific to me, so not everyone's gonna be as impacted by it, but I loved reading about Radar and how she really wanted to play and be active because she used to be a fierce German Shepherd. Now she has arthritis in her hips and she just can't do the things she used to do. And that's something I relate to so much because my 13-year-old Shepherd is very much the same. She wants to play. She wants to follow me everywhere. She wants to be protective, and she just doesn't have the capability as much anymore. And it's something that really stresses me out because I know a difficult day is coming soon. So having that represented in a book lifted a weight off my shoulders that I didn't know I was carrying. Seeing someone else experience this kind of heartbreak with your best friend, seeing them age, was very impactful, and that's one reason I loved this book. I'm surprised hearing reviews of people say they don't like the fantasy element of this book and that it gets kind of weird. There's also this epic journey as Charlie goes to this other world, and I'm kind of like, it's right in the title, FairyTale, that this is going to be fantasy and a little bit strange. So I don't know if that is the main thing that's kind of bugging people. I do agree that it kind of dragged on a bit for me. There was a scene where Charlie was held captive, let's say. That thoroughly bored me. I was more into the journey aspect than I was that. But you also don't pick up Stephen King because you want a quick, concise story. Am I right? The fantasy element in this book was something that was very different for me for what I've read from King so far. And I was just in awe and appreciating the skill that he has, that he can write scary horror like It, and then also a book like FairyTale. And this is one that It wasn't happy all the time or all the way through, but the overall tone I felt was very heartwarming. And that's another reason why I really enjoyed this, because it hit my mood just perfectly. I didn't want an emotional, high stakes read, so this really fit the bill for me. I love the strong father and son relationship built on trust and communication. I loved how kind-hearted and considerate Charlie was and how much he wanted to help people. I really liked the found family vibes as Charlie and his neighbor built their friendship. I also love the appreciation for seniors because they have so many interesting stories and tales, and so I liked this 17-year-old kid bonding with this senior citizen. And of course, you know I'm gonna love any story that's about a journey for the sake of a dog and for the love of a dog. So those are all the reasons I really enjoyed reading this. In my opinion, there was zero horror in this. So if you're interested in checking out Stephen King, but you don't really like horror, this might be a really good option. There was suspense, there was an element of good and evil, and mythical, magical creatures, but it wasn't scary like It, The Shining, Pet Sematary. So you would be clear and good to go with FairyTale. My next favorite is a King book that I think is criminally underrated. I don't hear anything about this book, and I think it needs more attention. That book is Needful Things. In this small town, a new store is opened up by a mysterious stranger. And although everything in the store doesn't have a price tag, it is definitely for sale. And there is definitely something that you are interested in this store. It turns out that you also have just enough money to buy it. But there's an extra cost too, because the owner of the store asks for a favor from you. It doesn't seem like a big deal, just a prank against one of your neighbors. If you are going to pick up this book, definitely be prepared for a character-driven story, because I feel like we spend a lot of time with different characters, really understanding what makes them tick. And it all comes together, I promise. King is really great at descriptions of small towns, and this is an awesome example of it. And the dynamics between all the neighbors, it's that kind of place where everybody knows everybody, and there's petty little squabbles between a bunch of the neighbors. As the discontent between the neighbors evolves to be something much more sinister, be prepared for King's signature vulgarity, also some more gore, and I did want to warn you that there is the murder of a dog in this book. And I saw it coming. It was a relatively quick section, so you can skim over it pretty quickly, but I always like to warn others of that since it's a trigger for me. One of the characters that we are following is a police officer. In fact, I think he might actually be the sheriff. And so we have this mystery because he doesn't quite believe the stories that are being pegged to these crimes in these murders. He thinks there's something else really fishy going on. King is also notorious for adding Easter eggs to some of his other books. So when you're reading this, keep an eye out for mentions of Shawshank, Cujo, and Derry. I had so much fun with this book. Yes, I felt like it was drawn out at times. It's not a perfect book, but again, you don't pick up King for a concise story. You gotta know he's gonna flesh out every character. He's going to flesh out the small town, so you understand the politics behind it, the dynamics between all the people, so you just have to have the right expectations going into it. I liked the element of the mystery, but I do feel like the ending was incredibly rushed. I wanted to see a little bit more cat and mouse between the owner of the store and our hero, and so that was too rushed for me. But I did really enjoy the intricacy of all the tricks and pranks that the neighbors were playing on each other. Although Needful Things isn't one of my favorite Stephen King books, it is my second favorite for this reading vlog. Of course, the last book I picked up for this vlog was Rose Madder. This is about a dirty cop who was also a very, very abusive husband to his wife, Rose. I have never hated a villain so quickly as I did in this book. It took me like 3 or 4 pages to thoroughly hate this man. The prologue itself can be very difficult to read, so huge trigger warnings for domestic violence and miscarriages. This was very, very suspenseful, and it actually reminded me a lot of Misery, because in the beginning there isn't anything supernatural or paranormal. It's really about the evil and the pain and violence that humans inflict on others. In looking at some reviews of Rose Madder, folks say that the first half is really this story about domestic violence, and then the second half gets very fantastical and some say weird. I think King has this style where he meshes two stories into one. The Stand is one that comes to mind that made me feel that way, where the first half was about this pandemic and the second half was this good versus evil kind of magical thing. So I hear that's the same with Rose Madder, but to be honest with you, I DNF'd this book. And that's not because I didn't like it or it wasn't a good book. It's just not the right time for me to read it right now. I attribute this to the feeling of powerlessness from the dirty cop. The powerlessness of a wife being dependent on her husband for absolutely everything. And the powerlessness of a man and his violence against a woman. There's just too many things going on in the world right at this moment that make me feel powerless and frustrated. And with everything going on in the news and everything, this wasn't an escape for me. I was looking more for like a fun horror escape. And this was just very realistic, caused me a lot of anxiety. And I liked it. I want to read it. I want this evil man to get what's coming to him. So trust me, I will read it and find out one day. It's just right now is just not the mood. It's not the time. I had so much fun being in Stephen King's world in these 3 books and also the movie It. This was a lot of fun. Please don't forget to comment down below with your favorite Stephen King book or the one you are most interested in reading next. Thanks for hanging out with me in this video, and I will see you in the next one.